class?
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay, it looks like it's working. So, hey, Spanish students, this is Shawn from Japanese in a Year. He's a YouTuber who is currently learning Japanese in 1 year, as the title shows. And then you have a drumming channel, correct?
Yes, yep. I am a musician by trade. The language
Nice.
thing is
Well, that's a secondary
a
thing.
side gig. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you're learning Japanese, but like, I guess why did you choose Japanese and like why, I mean, what was kind of the inspiration for doing this channel and kind of starting this whole thing?
Yeah. Well, I guess that my Japanese thing starts before that with my interest in languages, which actually came from music. So being a musician, and once I started touring a lot more outside of the US, I had a lot more exposure to other countries, other cultures, other languages. And also in New York, just being a very multicultural city, I have a lot of friends from different places. So a few years ago, I started to get really interested in languages. So I actually studied Spanish in high school,
There you go.
for 3 or 4 years or whatever. And I really enjoyed it. However, at the end of it, I couldn't really speak very much Spanish,
Yeah.
which is not the fault of my teacher, who was great, or it's just the way the curriculum was laid out and the high school classes worked at my school. Just I didn't get too much out of it in terms of actual speaking skill.
Right.
So I kind of forgot about languages for a while, and then ended up taking some trips in 2013, 2014, and started touring a lot. And I thought, man, this would be so cool to like get my Spanish back. Like I went to the Dominican Republic and Colombia, and I thought it'd be cool to like speak a little bit of that. And so that was sort of the beginning. And then in 2014, I like went really serious and I learned French. So I started researching how to learn languages, how to learn them quickly, looking at what other people were doing, and realized that I wasn't bad at languages, and this wasn't something that had to take a long time or be expensive or require me moving to another country. It was just in the method. So that kind of blew open this whole world for me.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I did this tour in Europe, and I spent a lot of time in Paris working with French musicians and Tunisian musicians who also speak French. And yeah, so I learned to get to a comfortable conversational level in French pretty quickly in like 6 months in my spare
Yeah.
time. And so after that, I was like, all right, well, I have some Italian friends. Now I have to learn Italian. And then I learned
Cool.
a little bit of Norwegian, kind of for fun, because I have some like ancestors from Norway, and also was doing some concerts there. So I did that, and then now I'm at Japanese. So the I guess the to wrap up the long-winded answer to that is that I'm learning Japanese. I mean, it's partially out of a language interest, a cultural interest, um, and also I wanted to show people what I had experienced with this language learning process, which is that it's not a matter of being like somehow genetically talented at languages, because I think we all are in a way. Like we're sort of designed to speak languages.
Yeah.
So when you have a bad experience in a class or something, it's not really your fault. I think that's a pretty common thing in the US to think. But anyway, in my experience, I just wanted to show like, all right, I don't know any Japanese, but I've been through this process. So I just want to show you like literally what I do. And if you follow these steps, I mean, maybe with some different variations depending on the person, but you follow this basic structure like a recipe in a cookbook, you will be able to speak a language. So.
Yes. Gosh, I love that. I've got so many thoughts in my brain right now just because I like I've been like on that journey too of like what it looks like to learn more efficiently. And
Yeah.
I actually just taught Spanish in high school this last year for the first time.
Oh, cool.
And so it was interesting to like go from my regular tutoring like techniques and strategies and process like you're talking about, and then have to like kind of go into that like school system that I didn't
Yeah.
really like. I didn't like Spanish my whole like high school career either.
Yeah.
I didn't learn it very well until I like hit a teacher my last year that clicked. So that's like super interesting that you're kind of, yeah, that's like a very similar story to me. And not a lot of
Yeah.
people like find that like
Yeah.
language is completely possible to learn. It's just like you just have to find the method to do that and do it efficiently. So yeah, I completely agree.
Exactly.
And I think it's interesting because I think I heard you say, I think I heard you mention on one of your videos, I think it was the pronunciation vlog number 2 or 3.
Yeah.
You're mentioning Fluent Forever.
Yeah.
And that's like the first book I read
Yeah.
on like language learning, and just like completely just like
Oh, dude,
changed my
that
world
that
on
book.
everything.
Me
It
too.
just,
That book is the best thing.
I mean, truly, that's where I started to like learn how to learn languages. After my trip from Guatemala, and like I studied the language for 7, 8 years, and I like couldn't do anything in Guatemala. So it was just, yeah, I mean, just like a few of those things are very, very similar. But it's interesting how you use music, and you
Mm.
have used music to like learn the language. That's actually what I'm doing right now. I'm just about to
Mm.
release a course on Udemy. I don't know if you've heard of udemy.com before.
I just heard of it the other day, actually. I have a good friend, Adam Neely, who has a wildly successful YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It's gigantic, but it's music related. But he was telling me about it the other day.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I'm trying it for the first time, kind of like YouTube. Obviously, I'm a beginner. I don't really have much of an audience, but I'm doing that whole course on Spanish pronunciation, and then eventually being able to sing a song in Spanish. And so there's like a
cool.
lot of connections with that. And
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Fluent Forever,
absolutely.
he was like an opera singer, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
totally.
that was just like completely
Yeah,
blew my mind. I was like, wow, like that makes complete sense. Like,
exactly. Yeah. Well, that book too, for me, was the kind of the beginning that sort of just blew everything wide open. Um, because before that, I had been interested, so I was kind of like on the lookout for stuff. But once I found that book, it sort of all clicked. I was like, oh, okay, this is how you do
yeah,
it.
right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, another question that I had for you was just, I guess, the process. So you mentioned like kind of identifying that process that you
Yeah.
have of like learning the language, and obviously, like, I mean, that's really clear on your YouTube channel. Like, you're very intentional with that like process. So if you could just like outline what kind of in general that looks like. For me, it starts with pronunciation, then
Yeah.
vocab, and then grammar.
Yeah.
And obviously that might look different for everyone, and maybe like a mix of everything in between. But what does
Yeah.
that look like for you? What are you kind of thinking about when you start to learn a language?
Yes. So yeah, it's essentially the same for me. It's the basis of what I'm doing is from that book, Fluent Forever.
Yep.
And so, yeah, the first thing is to focus on pronunciation. And there's two aspects of that. One is training your ears, and the other is training your mouth to make those noises. So you have to train your ears first, because if you can't hear the differences between those nuanced or similar sounds, then you're going to have a harder time producing them. So train your ears first, and then train your mouth how to make it. And there's some interesting ways you can do that. With Japanese, I didn't go super deep into pronunciation because I don't have time to have a perfect accent, but you can do a lot
Yeah.
with a very short amount of time. And so I got it good enough to where I want it to be. But anyway, if you want to go super deep with that, speaking of music and all this, I don't know if you've heard of the mimic method.
Yep. Absolutely.
Very cool
EDOS is amazing. Yeah.
system for learning pronunciation that uses music basically as a way to keep things interesting while you're repeating these motions, because it's like practicing drums or
Yep.
um,
Learning the
some,
guitar. I
yeah,
use that analogy with learning the guitar, it's the exact same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, or a sports move, you know,
Yeah.
basketball. It's just you have to do it a lot of times. So it's the same with your mouth. You got to get used to making those, you know, it's moving new muscles in new ways. So yeah, pronunciation is the first thing. If you can understand, if you can hear those sounds right, you're going to have a much better remembering everything else afterwards. So it's much better to get the pronunciation out of the way first rather than what a lot of people seem to do, which is like, let me learn the language first and then I'll fix my accent later. It's like, no, you're going to
Yeah.
have so many bad habits by the time you get through all of that. It's going to be a lot harder to change. So
Right. Right.
start with
So,
pronunciation. Oh,
oh yeah, no, that's totally fine. So I was just curious because you said a few like tools and resources. What I mean,
yeah.
that kind of ties into like my third question, but
Yeah.
are there like specific, because like I have a few tools that I use right now. I like slow down audio. I have,
Yeah.
if you've ever heard of rhinospike.com, I
Yeah.
think that's from Fluent Forever, and also forvo.com. Is there any
Yeah.
other like good resources that you have that you use to like practice your pronunciation all on your own?
I think that covers it. I don't
That,
really
yeah,
have any other ones besides that.
that's
Uh,
good to know. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I think that the only other thing is it's not even an extra resource, but when I'm studying, I try and say things out loud just to have more practice and imitate the
Yeah.
recordings. And you might as well.
Right.
So
Right. Absolutely. I tell my students to kind of at least whisper it out loud to
yeah,
get to
yeah,
produce something with your mouth. So that's interesting.
yeah,
Um, yeah. And so, yeah, we're,
yeah. So from there, like you said, I would go to vocab and start learning those high frequency words that you can learn with pictures. I like to do that, learn those simple words with images first so you can skip out on the translation, start thinking in the language from the very beginning.
Mhm.
Um, so, you know, I want to attach the image, I mean, the word for a camera directly to this object rather than from
Just a
English to
straight
Spanish to
translation.
whatever. So
Right.
yeah, step two is vocab. In the case of a language like Japanese, there's actually an extra step in between there, which is like learning how to read and write stuff, learning new alphabets. And then, you know, for Japanese, that's kind of the main challenge actually throughout the rest of the process is this added layer of learning those characters. So it's a lot more data per word to learn. So it takes a lot more time.
Yeah.
But the process, other than that, the basic structure stays the same. Learn those basic words. As soon as you can, start using those words in sentences, and you can start to pick up grammar through those sentences, either by using a tutor or, um, you know, as far as like digging deep into grammar, I guess that would be like another phase where I kind of wait a while till I have a lot of vocabulary before getting out the grammar textbook.
Hmm.
Because if you do that, you're going to know most of the words in those example sentences. And so you can really cruise through and use the grammar book for grammar and not
Hmm.
be slowed down by, okay, I don't know the word for university and the student went to, you know, you learn those basic things and then you can pick up the grammar, the vocab tenses, and
Hmm.
move through that very quickly.
Yeah. So what do your vocab words, so this is kind of going off of anything, but what
Yeah,
do your vocab cards actually look? So what I've been trying with my students for the past about 6 months,
yeah,
I tutor Spanish, so
yeah,
um, I've been trying mnemonic devices on the front of my cards, so
mm,
they can write it in English, but they cannot say any of the word or part of the word in that this kind of like story. And then I also have them put a picture on front. Have you ever tried mnemonic devices, or do you just stick with the picture? Have you seen most success with just a picture?
Um, mnemonic devices in what sense? I've definitely used mnemonics. How are you using them in this case?
So in this case, I would have them connect the words. So like first, let's just say they're learning cat
Yeah,
in Spanish.
yeah,
They would take the word cat and they would think of a story or an experience. I think I got this from Fluent Forever as well.
mm-hmm,
But somehow connect that word to like an experience that you have,
mm,
and then connect that experience to the spelling of the word. So whether that's like
mm,
ga, like taking ga and somehow connecting that into that story.
yeah,
to make that kind of as your clue, but
Yeah.
it's not like a direct translation. It's still, you have to think about that experience, and you're kind of building, it's more long term. I'm trying to make it more
Yes.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
long-term memory,
Right.
and I don't know exactly. It's more of a trial period, to be honest with you. In the last
Yeah.
6 months of
Yeah.
trying mnemonic devices, they've been useful for me, and that's why I've been using them. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was just curious if you had any like specific strategies, or if you think pictures are just like simplest for people and like a really good way. Maybe it's like a mix of the two. I don't know.
Yes. Okay. So, first of all, yes, always have pictures. I think whether you're
Yeah.
doing the extra personal connections and mnemonics and stuff, always have pictures. I think that you can read the research like in that book Fluent Forever about how much that boosts your memory or how powerful our visual memories are. So, yeah, always have that. Yes, those kind of personal connections are huge. Those are really important. Like, for example, when I was in Italy last year, I spent a couple months there. And so I would pick up all this vocabulary from actual real life experiences where I'm hanging out. And, at that point, I could speak well enough that I could understand most everything. But if I came across a word that somebody said that I wasn't familiar with, I can just ask them in Italian, okay, what does that one word mean? So I would take those words and I would write them down. Otherwise, I'll just forget them. So I write them
Right.
down and I go back later and make flashcards out of it. And then for me, on the backside of the flashcard, normally I would have some kind of note about, so and so said this, or something to remind me about that day, that
Interesting.
situation.
Okay. Yeah.
And the mnemonics, I think, more similar to what you were talking about before with learning the word for cat in Spanish. I've been doing a lot for Japanese because there's so much less of a connection between English and
Yeah.
Japanese that I need these like little stories to remember how to say things. Um, so I think that I did use that in some cases in the previous languages, although I found that like in French or something or Spanish, there are a lot of words that are very similar to English that you can kind of get away without um, doing something like that. Like occupation is
Yep.
occupation. You get
Yep.
used to the pronunciation of these similar words. And so I find, I don't know, now when I go back and learn some new French words or Italian words, they tend to stick pretty well without me going through that extra step. But I am absolutely using those for Japanese. And if there's tough words in other languages, then yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And for me, that in practical terms, if I can try and think of an example, I would take something from the pronunciation of the word, and maybe it sounds
Yep.
similar to
And
something
that's
in
yeah.
English, and you try
Yep.
and
Connect it, and that's literally
yeah,
what I do. Yeah, that's
yeah,
what I'm trying at least right now. Yeah.
yeah. I've never tried that on the front side of the flashcard. I mean, it seems like it could be cool. So
Yeah, I mean,
if
maybe
it's
I tried
working.
on the backside too. That's something where you actually have to study what that like story is, and that could be an interesting way of doing it too. So
Yeah,
yeah, interesting,
cool.
cool. So yeah, I know I didn't mention this on my message to you, but you mentioned like immersions, like an
Mm.
immersion setting, and like
Yeah,
you were using the context, and
yeah,
like for me, like that was huge. Like being able to be in Spain for 6 months. I mean, everything is in context, right? Like you're
yeah.
learning everything. I didn't need to make flashcards because life was my flashcard.
Right, right.
Every day I was just picking up things. And so, what would
Yeah,
you say for maybe the like adult learner, or maybe not necessarily adult learner, but just the maybe older learner of a language, of like what that might look like for them, and
yeah,
like obviously having a job and learning
yeah.
learning a language. Like I've never been in that position before, and so
Mm.
I know it's possible. Like I know it's
Yeah,
completely possible to do it, but I also I can't speak from experience. So I don't know if you
yeah,
have experience with like,
yeah,
obviously you drum and then also are learning languages. So what would
yeah.
you kind of recommend for people, how to like um, kind of navigate that in normal life, I guess you might say.
Totally. Yeah. Well, all of my language learning experiences have kind of been like in the background in my spare time on the subway, like looking at my flashcard on my phone or whatever. With, I guess, maybe somewhat the exception of Japanese, where I'm putting a lot more time in this one per day than I have the past ones, because I'm trying to do this ridiculous timeline here. But
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so a couple things. You don't necessarily need to be in the country to get that immersion experience in small but sufficient doses, meaning that you can, one way and one of the best ways to start immersing yourself is to do the monolingual flashcards, where you don't have, you know, English or another language. You use the flashcards without translation. And so when I'm doing Japanese stuff, I'm trying to think in Japanese. I'm 100% in Japanese. I think that's one of the benefits of using that approach. It forces you to kind of change the way that you form thoughts and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's one level of immersion. And of course, there's a million places you can find tutors and language partners on Skype and stuff. So, you know, like italki being the big one for me that I use all the time. And personally, I find that I like to learn the language at least up to a certain point before going to the country. Because once I'm in the country, I want to like be a tourist and like go around, and I get distracted and I don't have time to study because I'm like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
So I find that I actually study a little bit better when I'm removed from that distraction.
Yeah.
And then once you're at an intermediate level, you can really pick up stuff quickly. Like now, if I go to France or something, yeah, like you're saying, you don't even need flashcards most of the time, because everything just becomes a lot more sticky in your head, which is nice. And so I like to be in that position to get the full benefit out of the country.
Yeah. That's huge. I mean, that's what I give to my students is I don't necessarily meet with my students for a super long time. I try to usually like finish my lessons within 3 months max. And like being able to have that's what I love about like what you just said, is that like once you have that foundation, then you can use that. Like
Right.
you're not going to know like a ton of grammar, but you can use the small amount of grammar that you do know to immerse yourself and like get your point across, start to have conversations. And that's when you really start to just pick it up.
Totally.
And that's what's fun. Like that's just like the fun part of like language and talking in general. So that's interesting that you say that, but I think that ties well into my next question, which is what opportunities have opened up because you've learned like languages? Obviously you're like at least intermediate levels for what did you say, about 4 languages? So that like, I would imagine that is opening up opportunities, whether that's with relationships or, you know, employment or, you know, I don't know if obviously you might not be looking for that in employment, but have you had, I mean, what have been the benefits? How has it changed your life as far as the practical side of learning languages?
Yeah, it's been really cool. I mean, to go from only speaking English like a few years ago to, in a very short amount of time, to have like access to all of these different worlds, meaning to different cultures and to different people, and to have that happen really fast is kind of mind blowing. And so it's like I see possibilities everywhere, but it allows you to get really deep into a culture in a way that you never can without knowing the language. So it's great for travel, like on sort of the first layer, even just learning a few phrases can be really helpful. But then if you take it another level, even to where my Spanish is, which is not very good, like definitely not fluent, like can't really even hold a conversation, but I can ask for all the basic necessities. I can order food. I can understand the kind of daily transactions I would need to have. And that alone makes a huge difference. So I love going to Spain or to these other places. if I go to somewhere like Germany, I love Germany, but I'm kind of uncomfortable and I feel rude because I don't know German. Um, but you know, you do what you can. Like you learn how to order a beer and you learn those 10 phrases and to get you through the trip. But anyway, if you learn the language, it opens you up to that, to more travel. It opens you up to a lot more people that you can, like you said, form relationships with, become friends with. And that is really cool. So for example, just yesterday, I was doing a rehearsal um, with a bunch of Italian musicians. So it was like 3 Italian guys and me. And, you know, when 3 guys from Italy get together, they're going to speak in Italian and they're going to drink espressos and, you know, we're going to like do the whole
Yeah, right.
Italian thing. And so now that I can follow what's going on and I can be a part of that conversation, it's really cool that,
So fun.
you know, like they can do their thing and I can chime in and, you know, sometimes, how do you know that like phrase, that dialect thing or so, you know, obscure thing. It's fun to participate that and to allow those, your friends to kind of be comfortable and do their thing and not have everyone always have to switch to English. So I didn't like being that guy,
Yeah.
you know, the only guy that only speaks English. So yeah, it's opened up just a lot of really cool things like that. And also from a cultural perspective, I think it's really interesting to just get another point of view. Like Japan, for example, is about as different as I can possibly imagine of a culture from Americans. So it's really interesting to see how things work there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's something that Idao Sanes really focuses in on is like making that connection with people. And that's why he wants to learn languages. And that's
Absolutely.
usually, I feel like that's usually when people actually are interested in learning is when they actually meet like a real person.
Yeah.
And then they realize, oops, I can't communicate and I want to communicate. And then that's like the spark of like, oh, okay, now I get to like why languages are important. So that's like a huge, I mean, that's a huge thing to be like really intentional about meeting Spanish speakers. Like obviously I have my Spanish speaking friends and I've got that outlet. Some people don't. And so that's like,
right.
If you can get that kind of outlet for yourself, especially at the beginning, that's like a massive thing to really like just the emotional like connection side is like a big thing. And describe it. It's one thing that I do with my students is describing their why right from the beginning. Like I mean, too many times I've had students not know why they want to learn a language. They think it's just cool to learn it, and then they just burn out after like 4 lessons. And that like I don't like that. So it's just I don't know. That's interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's huge. I think that personal connection is really important for, you know, motivation, and you know that can be a really huge factor. And so I, in the beginning, only learned languages for, you know, I knew people already that spoke French and Italian, or I was going to a place. A trip can be another way to motivate that. But yeah, I totally agree. I find that having friends is possibly one of the best ways to motivate yourself and to keep going. So the sooner you can get that, the better.
Absolutely. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was just pretty much for me. So sorry, listeners, if you're not interested in this, but maybe you are. Maybe you're interested in making vlogs. But you obviously make vlogs. So any tips for me as far as I'm going to be going to Spain this summer, and my like goal is to make 1 vlog every day. My students have wanted me to do like conversational stuff, and I'm thinking of doing a mix of just this is what my day is like and conversational like bits, maybe like interviews with my host family. So I don't know, do you have any tips for me as far as what that could maybe look like?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm sort of figuring it out as I go too. So I'm always trying new things and doing different experiments. But a few things I would say that having a regular schedule has been really important. That's been really helpful. So whether it's once a day or like I do once a week, having that regular deadline of like, okay, I gotta like come up with something to either talk about or teach or show within that deadline. I think that's super helpful. Otherwise, it's just kind of like at some point in the future, I'm going to make some video about something, and then you kind of never get around to it. So yeah, the regular schedule. I think from like a technical standpoint, there's not too much to really talk about because I don't do anything special. I have like a GoPro and then like a kind of nice but entry level like DSLR camera. So between those, I just and actually I was using my iPhone for a while and I stopped using my phone because I have a new phone that's not an iPhone and the camera's not as good. But I think that a lot of the cell phone cameras are good enough. I mean, you can get 1080 HD, decent sound. So the technical stuff I think is not that big of a deal nowadays with technology. It's like easy enough to get access to everything.
Yeah, I just got my new microphone actually, so I'm trying to figure out what that looks like and trying to streamline it. But yeah, I was planning on just doing it. I've got an iPhone 7, just got it a little while ago, so like I'm probably just going to use that. Honestly, bought myself a selfie stick, which I never thought I would do after going to Rome and Paris, but I finally did. And it also like mounts my phone or whatever. It has a different. That's interesting, and I think for me iPhone is just fine. But
and then the last thing I can think of is that from more of if you're trying to get the vlog popular, I mean, I don't know if I'm really qualified to talk about this because my thing is not like gigantic by any means in the
I mean, you've got about what, two grand?
Yeah, something like that. So it's cool that it keeps growing. But one thing I've observed, like in different people that I've seen be successful, whether it's on YouTube or actually in the arts in general, this sort of applies, is like having a unique thing, that like as a musician, for example, there are so many like overqualified, insanely good musicians. There are way more great musicians than there are jobs for those people. So the ones that are working, generally have a combination of different things or a unique combination of skills or something unique that they do. And of course, there's relationships with other people and that all ties in. But yeah, from a vlog perspective, I think having something that is different than what's out there and also like sort of clear what the idea, like I think Japanese in the year, like there's not anyone else really that I know like doing that exact thing. It's a very specific, like clear idea, and maybe that's part of what is to get to where it is. I don't know.
Yeah, and having that outline of specifics. Yeah,
and also it was something that I wanted to exist. It was something that I was looking for. Like I was wondering, like, okay, if I want to learn Japanese, like how am I going to sound and talk at this level? Like what is this experience going to be like? How is that going to happen? I couldn't find that. Most of the language learnings, like online polyglot stuff I could find, was usually the finished product. Like I learned X language and like here I am speaking it. It's like cool, awesome, but like how did you get there?
Cool. And so you played the drums. I'm actually learning. So I played the drums back in the day, and I like kind of played the set, and I know how to do like basic stuff. But any tip? I'm trying to like, I've got my little drum pad. I'm like relearning rudiments and things like that. But any tips for like how to kind of get back into like an instrument? And there might be actually, there's probably a lot of connections between instruments and language. You were mentioning that before with like learning really, at least for drums, just like wrist movements and like really being technical with that right away instead of building bad habits. But just again, kind of a personal question, I guess.
Yes. Okay. Well, there's a lot of parallels, I think, and especially like having gone really deep into music and that being my thing for so many years, it's really easy for me to reference that for other things. But yeah, there's a lot of parallels with learning. Yes, like the technical things, it's much better, much easier to build good habits from the beginning than fix bad habits later. So yeah, there's that parallel. There's also, you know, you learn how to play an instrument, you also learn how to practice and how to like get in the habit of, you know, showing up and doing the work, because it doesn't happen just magically. Even if you have some kind of artistic spark, if you don't have the like technical facility to pull it off, or the,
Yeah.
you know, the, you don't know the vocabulary or whatever, then you're not going to be able to pull that idea off. So you do have to focus on those kind of technical things, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be like music right away. It doesn't have to be the language right away. I guess you can dig into
Yeah.
those things. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things. I do also know there's some kind of connection. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I know that there's a connection for me between wanting to learn different languages and being interested in different cultures and wanting to be able to play many different styles of music. I think
Huh.
there's some sort of a similar motivation there that I'm not sure what it is. Like I don't want to be totally unprepared for a situation, I guess, thinking musically speaking. And so I've done every kind of a gig you can imagine, from rock to jazz to classical,
So
some like
cool.
technical metal stuff, electronic music, country. I mean, really just everything. And it all interests me because it's almost like it's all one style of
Yeah.
music in a way.
It's almost like a new,
Yeah,
or like learning a new
it's,
dialect within the same language, maybe, or
yeah,
maybe just learning a different language in general.
yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
So yeah,
Interesting. Cool.
yeah,
That's cool perspective.
yeah.
And then kind of my last question is, how can viewers find you and kind of learn from you and your channel? And maybe you
Sure.
have a do you have a website?
Um, for the language stuff, no. And actually, my music one is down at the moment because I'm building a new thing. But
Oh, cool.
um, as far as, yeah, this goes, you can find the Japanese project on YouTube. It's Japanese in a Year. So if you search that, you should be able to find it. And that's the main place to find this. So I'm making a video every week, every Sunday, putting something out related to my journey learning Japanese this year. So
Cool.
that would be the main place. And then, yeah, if you want to see my music stuff, which is totally unrelated, I have that channel too. I think if you just search my name, you can find that
Yeah.
as well.
Sweet.
So
So it's Sean Crowder, correct? If I
yes,
remember that correctly.
ShawnCrowder.
Perfect.
That's it.
Sweet. Well, this was fun. I think, yeah, it was interesting. Like I wasn't expecting, obviously as a small YouTuber myself, like I wasn't expecting anyone to like respond. And so it was cool to see like someone that had a lot of things in common with me as far as like languages and all, and then like drumming as well. It was interesting. And so I
Yeah,
thank you for doing this and just
sure.
discussing with a complete stranger like me on YouTube. That was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. Yeah, you know, when you wrote to me, I saw it seemed like from what I checked out that, you know, there was some commonalities and could be interesting. So cool. It was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to stay in touch, and yeah, I want to respect your time. So have an awesome day. Thanks again
Cool.
for doing this, and potentially we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, enjoy Spain. I'm heading to Europe pretty soon myself, so
There you go.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it over there.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, we'll have a good one.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
See ya.